Okay, let's talk about installing your basket on your E-RIDER. First, we'll go over the tools that you're going to need for this project, and then I'm going to do a quick overview of everything that we're going to do, and then I'll show you step by step on how we're going to install the basket itself. A few tools that you're going to need. If you've watched any of the other videos, you'll notice a trend. We use pretty much the same tools for everything that we do with these scooters. The first tool here that I have is going to be a HW5 hex bit. We'll use this for some of the hardware that we're going to use to install the basket itself. I have a 10mm socket, I have an 8mm socket, and then I have a pair of wire cutters here. That's all the tools that we're going to need, other than some zip ties and some tape later on. But now what I'll do is I'll walk you around and kind of show you the project from start to finish, and then we'll get into the step-by-step process. Okay, y'all, so we're going to do an overview of what we're going to be doing for this project. I'll kind of walk you through high end, and then we'll, like I said, go step by step. The first thing that we're going to end up doing is we're going to cut these zip ties that are on this piping here, and it's going to free up the wire that's coming from the rear light itself. And this wire runs all the way in through a hole in the rear of this box here. And it's this skinny wire here. And then it's going to go into this unit that basically connects to the controller. So once we have all the zip ties clipped, we're going to open up this cover here. And we're not going to undo anything, but what we're going to basically be doing is just getting the slack of this wire out and pulling it so that we have about 12 more inches to work with. Because what we need to do is remove this seat, we'll attach the basket, and then we're going to basically take this, undo this light and move it back so that it's attached to the rear of the basket instead of the seat where it is now. So, like I said, once we have that basically pulled out, the slack pulled out, we'll remove this seat, and then we'll attach the basket using the hardware that we basically provide you with the basket, and we're going to attach it to these mounts that are found on either side of the rear tire on the frame here, and the plate of the basket will be attached to the seating plate here. Once we've attached that basket, then we'll have this rear tail light that we can add to the back end of the basket here, and then we'll go ahead and zip tie it up and close everything up, and then we'll be done with this project. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and dive into the first thing now. Okay, so using my wire cutters here, you can see that I've removed the zip ties, which now has freed up my wire that's coming from my rear tail light. And you can see what I talked about. So I opened up this covering here, and there was one or two wire ties in here. I snipped them, just being careful not to snip any of these other wires that are in here. So I basically cut the zip ties that were holding this all together, and now I'm able to pull this slack out of what was basically pushed in underneath that covering, so that I can now pull more of this wire out towards the rear through this hole here. I'm just pulling it back out this way, and this is going to allow me to now use this wire, or basically pull this light further back and attach it onto the back of our basket. So once you've done that step, then now what I'll do is I'll put this cover back on, and then I'll start focusing on removing the seat. Okay, so now you can see that I've buttoned up that cover plate there. It's back in place and everything's looking clean, so to speak. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the seat, and all we're going to do is there's 3 nuts on these screws, and there's one on this other side here. And all you're going to do is essentially get your socket wrench, and you'll loosen these up, take these nuts off, and we'll take the seat off and put it over to the side. And this seat plate is what we're going to be attaching our basket to. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, now we have our seat removed. As you can see, this is the seating plate that we're going to be using to attach the plate from the basket onto. So we'll show you that step here in a second. But first, you can see I have my seat off to the side. What we need to do now is get the tail light undone here. So again, it's just going to be another screw and nut. If I can show you, there you go. You can see it right there. Basically, we're going to undo that nut, and then we'll put our tail light just off to the side. What I typically like to do is I'll move it and just drape it over this side of the fender while I'm attaching the basket, just to kind of keep it out of the way. I'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll go ahead and start getting the basket set up. Okay, now that rear tail light is removed, you can see that I've basically draped it over the side here, just so it's out of the way. For the screw and the nut that I took off, I'm not going to need it again. So I typically will just put them in a bin and just hold on to them for some other project, or you can toss them out if you want to, but you're not going to have to use these once we put the basket on, because what we're going to end up doing is we're going to take this little T-bar here, we're going to unscrew these nuts, and we're going to attach the light using this T-bar to the back of the basket. So let's go ahead. I'm going to focus now on showing you guys how we're going to attach the basket to this seat plate, and then I'll show you what the next steps are for attaching the arms and everything after that. Okay, so before we attach the basket, I want to show you basically what you guys are going to be getting whenever you purchase your basket. So when you purchase your basket, you'll get the basket itself. You're going to have two arms that are going to connect to the frame and then to the side of the baskets, and then you'll get a package of hardware here. The hardware should be 6 screws. 2 of them are going to be without washers or nuts, and that's because they're going to be the screws that go into either side. These plates that are attached to the pipes, they don't need to have the screws or washers attached to them. And then you'll have 2 that have just the nut. I'll use those for attaching the basket to the base plate here. And then the ones that actually have the lock nut and washer along with the nut itself, those are going to be used for attaching the arm to the basket. And I'll show you what that looks like as we get to that point, or once we get to that point. Why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm going to show you what it looks like to attach the basket first to the seat plate, and then I'll show you the next steps. Okay, so I went ahead and got a few things started here. I wanted to show you some things before I actually move too much further. So first things first, the basket that is attached now to the seat plate, there's going to be 2 of these, basically these bolts with the nut. And if you look, there's going to be holes that align with this plate. This one that's closest to the end here is going to be in the hole that's obviously closer to the front of the seat. And then this back one here will go in this hole, and then I'll tighten those down. Some of these, they'll tighten up on their own, but you may want to get just a pair of channel locks or something to hold the nut on the bottom side, because what we'll do is we'll use our hex bit to basically turn this and tighten it up. And sometimes, like I said, I just need to get a pair of channel locks to hold the nut on the bottom side. So that's the plate that attaches to the seat. And then coming down here, you can see I went ahead and attached the arm, and it's just loose. Like I said, I just got it started. I haven't tightened it up yet. But I wanted you to see this is the screw that doesn't have the nuts or the washers. It's just the screw by itself. It'll go into that threaded mount there, so it'll be nice and tight on its own. And then you can kind of see the angle of the arm and how it's situated. So you want to basically have it flush with that mount, and then you want to have this bend go out away from the bike itself, and then it's going to go up here and attach to that hole there on the basket. And you can see on the back side, or on this other side here, I've done the same thing. So again, I'll use my hex bit, and I'll tighten up those screws into those mounts, and it'll tighten that up. And you can see this bracket, or this arm here, it's flush with the frame, and then this bend goes away from the tire, and it's gonna mount right here with these 2 holes. So let me go ahead and get that tightened up. I'll show you what everything looks like, and then I'll show you basically us attaching this arm to the basket on the back end here. All right, y'all, so now you can see I've got everything attached and tightened up. went ahead and I did actually need to use channel locks. So just get yourself a set of channel locks to hold the nut that's underneath here as you use the hex bit to tighten these two up here. And then I got my hex bit and I tightened up these two screws that are attached on either side. Those are nice and tight. And then again, I used my channel locks to hold this nut while I turned the head on these bolts here and tightened the arms up on either side. So you can see now that basket is firmly attached to the frame and ready to go. So the next step that we'll focus on now is taking our light and we're going to attach it to the back of this basket. What we're going to do is we're going to take our 8mm socket and we're going to loosen up these nuts. We'll remove this little T-bar here and I'll show you how we're going to mount that to the rear of the basket, and then we'll run our wiring and zip tie it and get it all nice and clean, and then put the seat back on, and we're going to be done with this project. So let's go ahead and get this light mounted. All right, real quick, I want to show you how I have this T-bar set up. So I just have it to where it's sitting flush. This arm piece here is sitting flush with the bottom of the basket, and so is the front end of it sitting flush with the back side of the basket. And as you can see now, I just have the rear light, and I'm going to run it through these holes on either side, okay? And then I'll take the nuts that I have, and once it's basically attached to my screws are basically run through these holes on this T-bar, then I'll go ahead and get those nuts, tighten it up on the back end, and it'll be attached. Also, one thing to note is make sure that your wire that's coming out of the back of the light is facing down. Otherwise, you'll have them backwards, the blinkers and everything when you attach it. So one last thing on this, I typically will set this up so that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these down bars on either side of my light. And when I have it attached, I'll show you. That way I know that it's in the center of the basket and it's not going to be over to the left or over to the right, you know, off-centered. So let me go ahead and get this on there and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay guys, now you can see here, I've got this light mounted and attached. You can see what I was talking about with these down pipes here. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 on the edges of the light, so I know it's good and centered on the basket itself. I went ahead and used my 8mm socket and tightened up these nuts on the screws. So this thing it's on there and it's good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run this wire and I'm going to follow this piping here, and I'm going to use zip ties and just zip tie it periodically. And then when I get to this 90, I'll go ahead and turn it and zip tie it so that it follows this pipe. And then we're going to just follow it. We're going to attach the zip ties to this piping here and follow where we see that they were. And that's really going to be it. We'll attach the seat, and then on the inside you can reattach the tape, or if you want to use Velcro just to make those wires clean, you can do that as well. But let me go ahead and get this wire zip tied and looking clean, and then we'll get this seat on and we'll be done. Okay, now I have this wire run and zip tied. This is how I typically do it. You guys can, you know, run this however you want to. This to me is the cleanest and most efficient way. I use 8 zip ties, and you can see I basically follow up this bar where there was zip ties previously, and then I'll attach it here. Like I said, run it to this 90 and then back, and I'll attach the wire first to this T-bar in that furthest hole there. After that, it's secured and ready to go, and then I'll come in with my wire cutters and just cut in the extra ends that I don't need off the zip ties. And then I turn them down so that, you know, if somebody has their hand in here or whatever the case is, they're not gonna, you know, scratch themselves or cut their hand on the loose end that I cut off. One thing to note on these, I've only ever seen it 2 or 3 times on these scooters, but there is the off chance that this screw is going to really struggle to go into this mount here on the back of this pipe. And the simple solution that I typically go to, or that I have gone to on the 2 or 3 times that I've seen it, is I'll get a drill bit and you just have to bore out that hole a little bit more. For whatever reason, it's just not a clean, it's not a clean hole, and the threads are too tight or whatever the case may be. So if you go in there with like a metal drill bit, you just bore out the hole and you just get it to where that screw has enough room to go in there and bite, and then it'll go in, and that solved the issue every time. So like I said, it's an off chance that it actually happens to you, but if it does, that's the solution that I've found for it. The only thing left now, like I said, is we're going to put this seat on. We're just going to use our 10 millimeter socket to basically tighten those nuts down. They'll go into these holes here. Our seat will be good and on top of this plate and ready to go. And then the last thing I'll do, which I'm not going to show you guys, is I'm just going to tape up the wires on the inside of the box here just to make it to where it's clean looking and the customer doesn't have any issues with it moving forward. So I'll go ahead and get this seat attached, and then we'll close it out. Okay, y'all, that's it. That's the process of attaching your basket to the back of your E-RIDER. You can see I've got my seat back on. We're ready to go. I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. Like I said, with everything else on these scooters, it's a 10-15 minute job, at most. If you don't have a hand, or if you don't have a phone in your hand trying to record at the same time, it's going to be a quick and easy project to attack. You can do it, like I said, either by yourself or get a buddy, but it shouldn't take you longer than about 15 minutes to do. Hopefully, like I said, this was helpful to you guys. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll see you on the next project.